Good morning and welcome to the pre-agenda interviews for Thursday, June 1st, 2023. We have 2 appointments for the Disruptive Properties Appeals Board, 1 appointment for the Housing Authority Board of Directors, and 4 appointments to the Commission on Human Relations. And we are joined today by Councilwoman Barbara Warwick, and other members may join us later. Is anyone online? No one's online yet? Okay. And we're going to begin with the Commission on Human Relations. Madam Clerk.
Do you want me to just read the... Okay, I'll read them all. Bill 1508, resolution appointing Billy Vaughn as a member of the Disruptive Properties Appeals Board of the City of Pittsburgh for a term to expire December 31st, 2025. Bill 1509, resolution appointing John Katz as a member of the Disruptive Properties Appeals Board of the City of Pittsburgh for a term to expire December 30th, 2027. Bill 1510, resolution appointing Jayla Rucker as a member of the Housing Authority Board of Directors with a term to expire December 31st, 2024. Bill 1539, resolution appointing Tiara Collins as a member of the Commission on Human Relations for a term set to expire December 31st, 2027. Bill 1540, resolution appointing Genevieve Rossello as a member of the Commission on Human Relations for a term set to expire December 31st, 2027. Bill 1541, resolution appointing Luz Esneda Blandon as a member of the Commission on Human Relations for a term set to expire December 31st, 2027. And Bill 1542, resolution appointing Dakota Rotino Garilli as a member of the Commission on Human Relations for a term set to expire December 31st, 2027.
Thank you. And we'll begin with you, and you can each say a little bit about yourselves and what you think you might be able to do on the commission, or what you're looking forward to doing on the commission. And if you have nothing to say, just say at least identify yourself so the public knows which one you are. And then we'll turn it over to Councilwoman Warwick for questions. You want to start? Yes, please.
So good morning, I'm Dakota Rotino Garilli. For the past 6 or 7 years, I've been working primarily on advocacy with regard to racial and gender equity within primarily systems of public education. So I work with Black and Brown youth, LGBTQ youth, around leadership development and mental health, and their families as well in terms of receiving supports. And so my work has primarily focused on ensuring that their rights are upheld in educational settings and that they're informed of their rights, and that educators are aware of policies and other supports that support the civil rights of those students and families in educational settings. And so I believe that experience would help me and allow me to have some more impact in this space to ensure that throughout the city of Pittsburgh, we're making sure that we're upholding the civil rights of protected classes in the city.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luz Esneda Blandon. I am from Colombia, and I came to Pittsburgh about seven years ago. During my time, I have been working with the Latino population, completing advocacy and working with the unaccompanied minors programs across the United States. I have been working on the human rights as well in terms of the immigrants and how they play a important role in the city of Pittsburgh, and how much that population is growing, and how important it is to also keep the Latino population in mind for the decisions that the city are making, and the resources and expanding more services for that population. It's been my work for the past 7 years since I came here.
Hello, thank you, Madam President and Councilman Warwick, for having us today. My name is Genevieve Rossello. I'm from the north side of Pittsburgh, but I am a lifelong Pittsburgher. I know firsthand what can happen when someone advocates for you. I grew up in McKees Rocks, and I have just lived all around the city. And I've seen our city change from the times when my grandparents had immigrated here to now, and I think that there's a lot more that we can do, and I'm excited to be a part of that. I've been working with some of our DE&I groups at my firm with advancing some of the equity across our environment, and then also with the League of Women Voters for the past several years, making sure that people have access to their voting rights and that kind of stuff. So thank you for having me.
Good morning. My name is Tierra Collins. I am a member of Pittsburgh's for Public Transit. Been a member with them for about 6 years. I'm one who actually fought and got them to win the low-income fare program, pilot program that we have running right now. I'm also a board member for the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council for food in low-income neighborhoods. I am also the CEO of Line of Judah Enterprises, which is for people of color with Down syndrome. I am a well-known advocate in Hazelwood, the Hill District, and other neighborhoods for people of color, and making sure that I advocate for what our children need, including inclusion, and that they're being treated fairly and not being treated differently because of who they are, how they look, or what color their skin is. I think that for this board that with everything that I've done for the city of Pittsburgh with low income and my knowledge, that I'm looking forward to being an asset and seeing how we can change and bring the world together more as a whole. So I'm really looking forward to this, and I thank you for the nomination and your time.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Councilman Bobby Wilson. Councilwoman. I've been called councilman many times, so. So, Councilwoman Warwick.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here and for, stepping up to serve on this commission. It's very appreciated. I guess just in general, we can go down the line. You all have very impressive resumes, and Tierra, I know extremely well. So at any rate, but I guess I would and I'll let each of you answer. Right now in the city, we've made huge strides, right, in diversity and inclusion, right, especially with this new administration. It's one of the most diverse administrations, well, not one of the most diverse administration in the history of the city. But obviously we're not there yet. And so I guess I would want to hear from each of you, from your perspective and in the work that you do, what are sort of like the top 2 or 3 areas of greatest concern? Where are we not there yet? Where do we need, whether it's the city that needs to improve or just issues of access and services, human rights violations, where you see the biggest problems and then I guess you could go into how the commission, or at least whether the commission as a whole or ideas that you have individually for how to address those issues. Okay.
Sure.
Go
So
ahead, Dakota.
as a trans woman, I'm very well aware of issues of inequity, not just in our city, but across the country right now. I mean, we have over 500 bills that have been introduced since the beginning of this calendar year attempting to legislate trans people out of existence in some way, shape, or form. And so I would say in our city, what I see as the most pressing needs have to do with the rights of trans people, and also with the rights of youth around mental health in particular. We have some really wonderful services that are provided by, in particular, Black and brown trans women throughout the city and the surrounding areas, but a lot of that work doesn't receive the support that it could, and it isn't also as broadcast to the public as it could be. And so I think public education is very important in terms of understanding what one's civil rights are, where does one go if their civil rights are not being upheld, and also, are there other people out there like me having these experiences, and are there places that I can go to find support from folks who I can identify with in some way? When it comes to youth mental health, I think that there's a real lack of understanding around what young people's rights are when it comes to their mental health. I mean, young people above the age of 14 are allowed to make a lot of their own decisions, but the supports around that aren't always there. And especially during COVID, and as we've continued to recover from COVID, a lot of the systems that support those youth have been really, really understaffed and under-resourced and put under a lot of strain. So finding ways to create even more spaces for young people and families, whether it be to educate them or whether it be to put them in communication with folks in positions of power who would be able to help them to understand their rights and make sure they're being met in the systems that they interface with, I think would be very important. And given that those two groups are relatively different, right? Like there are some young people with mental health needs who are trans, but we often see in Pittsburgh that groups are siloed apart from each other. So I think intergroup conversations are very important in helping folks to see the intersections of these civil rights needs and how we're all really working against some of the same inequities that show up with different faces, and helping folks to build power from the ground up.
Great, thank you.
So I think what we need, and you know, from my experience in working with the immigrant community here in Pittsburgh, is a better understanding on how that community and how that the new people that are coming into the city, for those that are living and are from Pittsburgh, and those that are coming in, how we can integrate them and how we can normalize different faces and different backgrounds, and how we can understand how those different backgrounds can help the city grow. And you know, diversity always comes with a great deal of different opinions and different ways to do things and different ways to see how we can improve the city and the services that we have. Language is still a problem. Language access and how the newcomers are able to have a chair and able to be here no matter where their language is from. And so how we can promote that and how we can promote that conversation between the different groups that are coming in, and not only talking about the Latino population, but also anybody who is coming from other country, how we can acknowledge them, how we can support and understand their needs, because they're very different. And if we don't understand them, and if we don't take a time to know where they're coming from and what are their needs, we are not going to create the space for them to be successful.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, I could see related to what Dakota just in terms of mental health. So, I mean, that would obviously apply, to this population as well. Yeah. Again, it's all okay.
I think that the importance of this commission, it just affects so much of what our city is. I mean, our city is full of so many different backgrounds and people, and there are, you know, neighborhoods that are just so beautiful and combined, and just we're seeing, you know, we are Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, right? But we know that in the reports that not everyone is experiencing the same neighborhood. And so I think the importance of this commission, and why I'm honored to even be nominated for this, is that I can have a direct impact to help make our neighborhood better. I think two of the issues that I really like to focus on is like housing equity, because I know that when you have a neighborhood and you know your neighbors, and your neighbors aren't constantly being forced to move because of different inequities, that creates a system where everyone can thrive. The other thing is, you know, my sister visited a while ago, pre-pandemic, with her then husband, who is in a wheelchair, and getting around this city was incredibly difficult. And so I think from a perspective of people with disabilities, I would like to see a better infrastructure for them to be able to navigate through our city, because it's one thing, you know, to have a wonderful neighborhood, but also to be able to enjoy that neighborhood and connect. So those are two things that I think we could really focus on.
Absolutely, thank you. Tiara?
So I would like to see, well, human rights. So I feel like our human rights aren't being met. So I feel like with this board, we can help make that happen, make housing better, low-income housing affordable. We can bring everyone together because it says it's the most livable city on paper, but it's really not. You know, people are treated different because of their color, the way they look, the way they speak. And for me, I think my goal would be to try to close that gap because, like she said, when you're handicapped, it's hard to get around in wheelchairs. It's hard to just even do anything. If you don't speak the right language, you can't get around. You get put, you're like on running around in circles trying to find stuff. I've been at so many different bus stops and people, and you can look and tell that they're lost. And for someone just to say, hey, can I help you? They're afraid to do it. And we need to be able to come together and start, like she said, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. That's the way it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be your neighbor, but it's not really like that. We shouldn't have to worry about being treated different because of the color of our skin or where we live, or people have to worry about being homeless or whatever. Or like I said, trying to get on the bus because you can't afford it. I think those things should be available, and I'm hoping, even for the healthcare, I'm hoping with this board that we can make things better. You shouldn't have to worry about what color your skin is or whether or not you get put on the transplant list and get activated, or if you can get a transplant. You should be able to get transplants because it's a required health need. It's something we're supposed to do. We're supposed to take care of each other, and I'm hoping that we can do that because it's not being done the way it should be. And I'm hoping with this board, because it is diverse, it's a new board, and I'm hoping with this board and our city council that we can make some great changes.
Thank you. So before I hand it over, I do want to say and I'm assuming you'll all be appointed to the commission. I don't have any doubts. But I would say just sort of as maybe a first step once you join an initial conversation is, budget season is coming up. And to remember that even though you are a city commission, right, the county, a lot of what you're talking about is city and county, right? So it's the city and county working together. And really, as a commission, doing a deep dive into those budgets and places where, because all of this costs money, right? Like all this outreach and investigating incidences of discrimination and educating communities about their rights and just really advising all our various departments across the city and county about ways that they could be better, right, about meeting the needs of diverse populations. So really taking a look at those budgets and, housing, transit, healthcare, mental health, workforce development, food access, right? It's all one thing in the end. So anyway, thank you so much for stepping up. And I'm excited to hear more.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And we're also joined by Councilwoman Deb Gross. Councilman Wilson?
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
And thank you all for being here today and your willingness to serve. I just had one question that I was thinking about when I was thinking about this commission and the type of legislation that I've seen come through this council, and specifically one around housing. I know that I had some challenges to get implemented, and there were some barriers to really, making sure that everything was working on that end. That's a little vague, but I guess on that, there is also an internal part that you can be a part of, and which is these type of decision making that happens at the HRC. And I just want to know what steps you all would take to make sure that marginalized and underrepresented communities are represented in your decision making.
So
we can start. We can switch it up.
Yeah.
You want to start on this end? Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
So I think first, education is very important. People need to be educated because if most people are afraid of what they don't know about. So I feel like if we start educating people, and that's everybody as a whole, we can change people. If you don't know something and people are afraid to ask questions, you don't get an answer. I feel like I've been educated for the last 11 years because getting a baby with Down syndrome and not expecting it and having to rethink my whole life, I had to completely change the way I think of raising this child. It's not like raising another child. You couldn't do things the way that you're used to. So for me, I feel like getting him was a way for me to open my eyes to see things in a different light. I've always been who I am. I've always been a person who wants to help and make things better. But with him, he's made me want to do more. I literally go out and I'm looking like I've helped people, moms get their GED and I've watched their kids because they've been short on childcare, couldn't afford it. So I think for me, it's just coming together and supporting each other. We need support. We need a shoulder to lean on, and that's what you don't get. I come from a big family, so I've had support. So being able to get through things, knowing how to ask questions or where to go, I've learned that from my grandmother. Most people don't know those things, so I think support is like the number one thing, and just education and being willing to open up and just lend a helping hand.
So I think, just like in council, our commission would be responsible for making sure that the people who are coming to our commission is working with you so that you can draft the kind of policies that you need to make change. We all know that change happens whenever policies are good and policies are solid, and I think that education is such an important part, so empowering people to advocate because they know that we have their backs, and so that city council has their backs with drafting good policy and good legislation. Those are the ways that we as a commission could help advance this city.
I think I agree with what my colleagues are saying. Education is definitely one of the best ways to empower people and to make sure that they know that we exist, that there is a resource there. Representation, of course, and for the commission, I think it's important to be able to be open and to be able to be available. I know that, be present and take every single problem or anything that comes to the commission and looking at it as a team, but also understanding the responsibility that we have. Building trust is a big one too. People don't come to you if they don't trust you. And so making sure that the language, making sure that we are inclusive, that we are able to also reflect what the city wants to do. And the mayor wants to do, which is a lot of representation and diversity within the body and everybody who works in the city. So we want to do the same, right? We want to represent that. We want to be able to have open lines of communication, accessible education, and just integration into the community. We don't know if we are not around. We don't know if we are not, closer to the community that we are serving.
So we're asking a question about vulnerability, right? Like we have people who are in a position of vulnerability when it comes to these various systems. And I think that to Tiara's point, there's this belief that whether it's based on our race or our education level or our socioeconomic class, that we don't have access to or the ability to impact these systems. And so I think that beyond education, what's really important is that folks who are in these positions of power are able to not just hear the voices of people directly impacted by systems, but uplift the voices of people impacted by these systems. I think that often we take sort of a bird's eye view of different issues when the folks who are most directly impacted are the ones who know the best what the barriers are and what the potential solutions might be just based on their own experiences. And so I think empowering communities, helping them to understand how various systems work, how legislation works, how policy creation and implementation works, who the various folks are who are able to make change around these different and interlocking needs. And also I think having, whether it's from commission members or advocating for this sort of mindset in other folks who are in power throughout the city, I think having a radical imagination is really important. We so often, I think, understand the way that systems have worked previously or the barriers that may come up based on different processes. And I think sometimes we have to take sort of a step back and another perspective and think, how can we address this in a way that might actually get at the root rather than try to utilize these processes that haven't always worked in the past, which is evidenced by the fact that we still have some of these issues, right? And so I think it's a combination of education but also empowerment for community members.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gross?
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm not there today. I appreciate your willingness to serve and all the work that you've been doing in the community to strengthen the city. And of course, I've worked with some of you, and I really appreciate your commitment to making change in the city. So we have basically this organization to protect people's civil rights. A minute ago, Councilman Wilson was mentioning that part of the problems that the commission has tackled around fair housing and housing discrimination, and it has made recommendations to City Council around how to provide fair housing. But then also in the crisis of the pandemic, we were trying to help people who had been served with eviction papers. And it was awkward. We were using our state declaration of emergency powers because this isn't work that we've been able to do before. But I just wanted to let you know that the commission is incredibly helpful around housing issues for individuals. So we've had constituents who felt that they were being discriminated against by their landlords, and it's the first place to call, which is fantastic. So I thought maybe we talked about a couple of different kind of public policy areas, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say anything more specifically around housing and your thoughts about fair housing and housing discrimination in particular.
Good morning. How are you, Ms. Gross? Good to see you. What I would like to see for things to change is it to be equal. You know, you got neighborhoods where that's where Pacific people can live, and that's only because that's where they can afford to live. I feel like for fair housing, housing is not fair. You should be able to live wherever you want, and you shouldn't be discriminated because of your color or your race or if you are handicapped. And I see that a lot. You know, you got the neighborhoods where the state South Hills, for instance, when you go out South Hills and put in applications, the first thing they look at is your race. And then they look at, okay, well, your income has to, I seen an application where I think it says your income has to be 4 times the rent. That's all discrimination. And I think things need to change, and we can do that, but we got to do it together. I don't like to see when people, your credit score shouldn't make a difference. It should make a difference, but shouldn't. And I think when they do things like, oh, well, we don't rent to them because we had tenants, you can't always think about what the last person did. You have to give people a chance. And I think even for that, it still comes to education. The one thing I was told that made so much sense to me was, when you have children, you were never taught how to be a mom, just like the child wasn't taught to be a child. So if you don't know how to do something, you need to be educated. And there's things that we need to bring back that you took away, that not you, but in general took away to make life different. They took away parenting classes. Parenting classes need to be brought into place. If you bring things back that was taken away, I think stuff that people are used to getting would change. So I would love to see stuff like that. And I know because as a teen mom, I had parenting classes. Even though I didn't need them, I took them anyways. Why? Because you can always learn something. So as long as people understand that you can always learn something and just be open-minded, things can change. But for housing, it needs to change desperately because there's people who's losing their housing that's been homeless from things that weren't even their fault for a year or 2 years. They still haven't found nowhere to live. And I know everybody's trying to do things, but I think we need to do things a different way because when something's not working, it's time to try another way to do it. Thank you.
So housing, making housing. Can you just rephrase, just reiterate your question for a moment? I need to rehear it.
Sorry, yeah, absolutely. So the Commission on Human Relations has done everything from writing our affirmatively furthering fair housing recommendations that they brought to council, but also because it's there to protect people's civil rights is where we go when we have an individual person, not just policy level, but an individual case of discrimination. And so, for example, even fairly recently, I had a constituent who was being discriminated against, she felt, by her landlord. And CHR is where we went to get help for her and to get recourse, right? So there's a variety of things. Like I said, we've struggled with eviction, and it's not a power we have to intervene on. We were able to do it for a short while under our emergency powers during the pandemic. But since we hadn't really been talking about housing in this interview, I wanted to give each of you a chance to speak to your thoughts on housing, fair housing, housing discrimination.
Okay, thank you. Like I said in my previous my answer just before, when you have diverse neighborhoods, when you have diverse populations living amongst each other, all of a sudden those barriers get broken down, where you see people as people instead of as whatever boxes they seem to check in your mind. Isabella Wilkerson says, we didn't build this house, but we are the ones who are responsible for its foundation and fixing it up. And I think housing is a huge issue for that. People can still, we need to be able to support our unhomed populations, but also those people who want to get back into homes, also helping them take those steps to find a place that is their home. I think this commission, the responsibility of it is to listen to people and to hear their stories, and along with you in City Council, to make sure that we are supporting people and believing people and making an environment. Diversity, equity, inclusion is not just about checking boxes and saying we've done this, we've done this, we've done this, but also perpetuating a feeling of belonging. And that's what I think this commission will do. Hopefully that answered.
Hi, I think to talk about housing and access to just as a basic human right, to be able to have access to housing, we need to promote that as something that is basic for people, that it shouldn't be something that is it's a privilege, or is only for people that have, these different profiles, and, only those can have or be able to access, housing in the city of Pittsburgh. My work with the Latino community, it's been about access, and I think this is a big one for the Latino population, especially the undocumented population. They do face a lot of challenges when it comes to be able to find a safe place to live. And really, that is something that it's extremely hard, because it's not only one person affected by, it's a full family, there are children in there that are looking for a safe place to live. And there are a lot of assumptions about different communities, and so they get to be kicked out because whatever the assumption is with the people that have been established there. So I think it sounds to me that the commissioners have already done a lot of work and have already done a lot of presence in these type of issues. And I think it will be very important for us to continue that conversation and to continue to be part of the solution and to continue to be part of, developing policies or talking to whoever we need to talk to, advocate for housing to be fair and to be accessible throughout the city. So I think it's, like I said, it's a basic human right, and it shouldn't be based on your credit score. It shouldn't be based on, your background or who you know. It should be just based on the fact that you need a house, and the city of Pittsburgh is a welcome city. That's what I want to see, and we can promote that as the commission.
I think to go off of the point about housing being a fundamental human right, and also that there has been work done in this area by the commission previously, I think it's important that we introduce to the conversation maybe a broader view of this idea of housing access. So I think one thing is this is a vulnerability which, like many other vulnerabilities that people experience, increases their risk of interfacing with the carceral system in many ways. Like people without homes often interact more frequently with law enforcement, are put under stress that might lead to mental health crises, are put into positions where they might be doing things to secure financial security that put them into, that have them interfacing with law enforcement as well. And there are particular populations that are more likely to not have a home, right? So I think that we also need to be considering trans and queer folks in general, especially in the current political climate, and what does access to housing look like for that population, in particular queer youth who are at risk of being kicked out of their homes by family members. I think it's something like the most recent statistic was 40% of youth without a home across the country are LGBTQ. And also young people, generally speaking. I work as a mental health therapist with a lot of young people who are in home situations that aren't necessarily beneficial to them, and they'd like to seek access to their own independent housing, but there are only so many programs within our city that provide independent housing to young people. And if they aren't, for example, a young person who has been involved with CYF or a variety of other systems, then they don't meet criteria for eligibility to independent housing. And yet we know that we have a lot of young people who need safe, stable, secure housing that they can financially access. So I think that we also need to consider how have various populations already been represented in some ways. Has that representation really covered the breadth of what they experience in terms of housing discrimination, and which populations have been overlooked, and how can we bring them into the fold to ensure that their needs are being represented as well?
Thank you, Madam President. That's all I have. I appreciate all of your answers.
Thank you. And I have no questions. I just say that good luck and thank you for your willingness to serve. I'll just leave it at that. And then the appointments will be on the agenda for Tuesday for confirmation. Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Thank you.
Stay cool
Thank you.
out there. And now we'll move on to Housing Authority Board of Directors. Jayla? Good morning. Thank you for your patience waiting here. And you can turn on your mic and just hit it, tap it, and make sure it's close to. Wait till you get comfortable there. And you can just introduce yourself, say a little bit about what you hope to bring to the board, and then we'll turn it over to council members to ask questions. Okay.
Good morning. My name is Jayla Rucker, and I am the president of the Hope 6 Manchester community. It's a scattered site. I'm also the educational outreach manager for Rent Help Pittsburgh, where we do evictions and appeals with the magisterial district and the Court of Common Pleas. I'm here today as a HACP tenant, and I know what I can bring to the board would be to actually help HACP identify who their tenants are by helping them recognize what assets are available to them within their communities, and that way that they can gain control over their lives. I've been an HACP tenant since I was 18 years old, and that's not something that is taught to you about how to know your rights and responsibilities as a leaseholder. And when I was at that age, of course, just like most folks who are looking for a roof over their head, just signs off a lease just because they want to get those keys in their hands. So I would like to make sure that we educate the folks that we serve and, of course, help them thrive.
Thank you. Do you have anything from members?
Yeah, sure. So, is that?
Please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, thank you for being here and also for stepping up to serve in this role. I guess I'm always of the opinion that it's good to have cheerleaders for organizations on the various boards, but it's also good to have skeptics, people who have sort of would like to see the board, whatever the board may be, right, would like to see the organization do better. So as a tenant, and if you don't mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but where are areas that you feel HACP could be doing better with regards, I'll just let you maybe say the top three things on your list.
Well, the first thing is the lack of communication that HACP has with their tenants. There is no one to educate them, for one. Two, the lack of resources that the tenants aren't aware of that is eligible to them. There are a lot of programs that can be useful to the HACP tenants, but they don't know how to utilize them, or they don't recognize the strengths that they have, because of course the most of the tenants are facing shame and trauma, with their everyday lives within the communities that they live in, and they're suffering from, mental health and certain things like that. But I feel like HACP could do more in addressing the community by showing them exactly how to gain access to the assets that are available to them within their communities, and just help them thrive. And a way they can do that is by allowing the tenants to have a voice. And of course, as us being tenants and they're the landlords, they're more of a threat to us when you're speaking out against them, and what their role is to play as them as being their landlord. Of course, we're just tenants, and what we say or do, some of those might not think that it matters, but it does, because it's our communities that we have to go back to and go home to every day. The folks at HACP, they don't live there, so they don't know what's going on there. Their maintenance procedures, they can address those procedures in a much better, timely fashion. I know that there are times where there are certain things that the tenants don't know to ask for when they are reporting maintenance issues, like their work order number. I came up with a way that we could be able to address that by maybe sending out a text message to the tenants when they call in for their maintenance orders, and give them their work order number, or give them an update on it once they've called in, and they should be addressed within a certain matter of time, I guess, depending on what it is. But I think that is just something they can gain better control over, or just asking the tenants what they can do to actually help them with the supports that they need in order for them to thrive.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then also, and this may not be your wheelhouse since you're a tenant in an HACP property, but I'm very curious about ways that that the voucher program, Section 8, could be improved to increase the number of landlords offering, right, who will accept tenants with vouchers, and the role. Oh, actually, let me take a step back, because just in terms of the tenant relations, when just in your experience, and again, only if you feel comfortable, I don't put you on the spot. By the way, the Commission on Human Relations is if one ever feels that their landlord is, at any rate, I'll move on. When tenants need to contact HACP, when they need to get whether it's a question, whatever, for whatever it may be, whether it's a question about rent, or whether it's a Section 8 question, or whatever it may be, how easy or difficult, and what, in your experience, is sort of the turnaround time, say if you leave a message or that type of thing?
I'll start with Section 8. Turnaround time for that can be months, weeks. I have had tenants come into our office at the Housing Stabilization Center, where I'm currently housed at, where I do evictions and prevention and appeals, that cannot get in touch with their housing specialist, or the housing specialist has moved on to another position and they don't return their emails or their calls, of course, because since COVID, most of their employees, they work from home and they're remote. And it's just really hard for them to get in touch with their housing specialists when they either need to get their moving vouchers or their raft of papers, or they're having issues with their landlord and there's things that need to be fixed. And the landlord's not doing them, of course, because they probably haven't received their payment from the Section 8 program, which pays a portion of that individual's rent. And I have found that for me, I have many connections that I have within the HACP, just because of the role that I play as, the president of the tenant council, and also just the organizations that I work amongst. And I have found it to be successful when I have reached out to many different folks and just CCing or blind CCing them on an email and letting them know, hey, this is what's going on. But tenants don't know what to do. They just have phone numbers that they're calling, and they're leaving message after message, and it's not being responded to. And I just think that the Section 8 program is not a good program. I would never take a Section 8 housing voucher.
And I've heard, again, just anecdotally, well, I guess if people are working from home, but if you go down to the office, is that something, does one need to take time off to go down to the office to?
You would need to take time off to go down to the office, but the office is closed. They actually moved it, and folks don't even know where it's been relocated to. That is something that I was made aware of just a few weeks ago when I had a tenant come in who is a veteran who has been homeless for over a year because they couldn't get in touch with their housing specialist. Mm-hmm. So their voucher actually expired, and they were considered as abandoning their unit, which really didn't happen. They were actually evicted because the landlord wasn't getting their portion of their payment from Section 8. And once I did get in touch with them, I was aware of that. They had moved their office.
Okay. Well, this is I'm very interested in the operations of the housing authority. I feel like, in my district, there are a number of HACP properties, and also in my district, I feel like there is lots of opportunity because we have lots of small landlords in my district. Folks who own 3, 4, 5 houses, rent them out, to, and I feel like there is opportunity there to enlist those landlords in the voucher program. But one of the issues that is stopping people is this concern about communication, and just dealing with the sort of the headache of dealing with the program itself. So I'm very glad that you are stepping forward to be on this board. The role of the tenant membership on the board is critical, right? Because you are on the ground dealing with the authority, with your lived experience. So thank you, and I look forward to working with you and hearing from you. And please always be in touch too, because like I said, it's something I'm very interested in, and whatever I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Wilson, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam President. I did, and Councilwoman touched on one of them. Usually my favorite talking point, but I'm not sure if you actually went that route, because you were talking about the voucher program in terms of how to get landlords more on board. And so I've always been interested, because there was a program that the URA had that increased 0% loans. Well, increased. They had 0% loans to landlords so that they can meet standards of qualifying. I'm not sure what the exact term is, but basically so they would be able to qualify to accept the voucher at that property. And then the HACP had a program as well, I believe, to better connect landlords. I think there was a loan option as well. I could be wrong. Regardless, do you see that as a? I mean, you'll be voting on the budget for the housing authority. Do you see that as an opportunity there to increase a program like that?
Honestly, depending on what stipulations are put in place, if folks have to present their income or their bank statements. I know I was in the home ownership program. I did that 8 years ago, and I didn't end up being successful. I went and did the workshop, of course, but of course then I had to do credit repairs. They asked for your last few years of income tax, your bank statements.
Are you talking about to become a resident at a property?
I'm talking about to become a homeowner.
Okay, well,
through the HACP.
I understand. The question I was asking was pertaining to just landlords. Like if the programs that they did in the past to increase funds to basically make money available to someone who owns a property so that they could use a voucher. Like say the doorway isn't right, or there's some lead remediation that has to happen. That landlord can go and use those funds, 0% loans.
Or to fix the house up.
Yeah, to fix the house up, so then someone can use the voucher there.
With a voucher.
Yeah, what do you think of that?
I think that program would be a great asset, but of course, as we know, what if it's the turnaround time on when the HACP sends the inspectors out to inspect those units, right? And of course, by then, that landlord could have potentially rented to someone else, who doesn't have a voucher, so.
Yeah, so.
It could be a benefit, and also it could be not useful as well. Yeah,
so that's where the conversation started with numbers, where there's, I don't know, can't remember what the number is, maybe 8,000. I should have mentioned the number. There's a gap in terms of vouchers that are, qualified, whether they're given or, once again, I don't know the exact term, but potential families, individuals that could use a voucher, that could get into a property, they qualify, and then there's just a huge gap in the program between an actual property. So if there is an issue of, because I've heard this too, that there may be an issue of, I don't know, sure if it's lack of staff or what the issue is. I haven't spent time to really dig into that question. But are you interested in in trying to understand that and whether or not, they need more staff to, on that program? I mean, you'll be seeing the budget. I'm just curious if that's something that that you're interested in
I
solving.
definitely think that they need more staff, but if the HACP was to implement a program like that, whereas though, the URA would give landlords money to fix up the units, and then they would automatically become a part of the voucher holder program, where would that list be enlisted at for tenants to know how to find those units? That's the much bigger gap right there, is tenants can't even find anyone that will accept their voucher because of the lack of communication, the inhabitability of the properties. And I really just can't see it happening, maybe in the long run. But
You said you're currently a tenant?
yes, I'm currently a HACP tenant. I've been a HACP tenant almost my whole life since I've been a renter. And I've never signed up for the voucher program. I didn't see there was any worth to
So you said Hope 6?
Hope 6.
That's a project-based voucher then?
Yes, and it is a scatter site.
Okay. What's your thoughts on the choice neighborhood program given that, that you're living in a Hope 6 property, in terms of the new federal ideas around, how to basically repair. The new model that they're presenting is a choice neighborhood. Are you familiar with that, and what are your thoughts on
Kinda,
the choice neighborhood?
sorta. Would I think I have some knowledge of the choice neighborhood program, which becomes like a mixed income program, and they of course tear down sustainable housing to recreate lesser units, and then they make those mixed income units, and folks are displaced by those choice neighborhood programs. Right now, for the last 3 years, Manchester, where I stay at, has been going through a RED, and they're coming in to redevelop. And at some point in time, we were privately owned by Penrose Management, and we were facing a mass eviction. That's actually the day that I came on board with wanting to become a housing advocate, because me and my family was at risk of being homeless. And of course, we fought against the Housing Authority in Penrose, and Housing Authority acquired their properties back. And then we became public instead of private. And right now that we're going through this RED, that I've been fighting for us to do just a one-time move. Do not tear our existing units down and have folks move out of their communities where that's all we know. I don't really know too much about what they're doing in other programs throughout the city with HACP choice programs, but I just don't see it being something that would be a greater outcome for the best for the folks who are involved in those choice neighborhood programs right now.
Not that you need to know this, but maybe you do. Maybe you've been told this, or maybe someone here already knows. Would you be the first tenant on the board? How many tenants are on the board?
I know Miss Cheryl Gainey was on the board.
Okay, yeah, I know Cheryl Gainey. She's on the
God
board.
rest her soul. She passed on. I've been knowing Miss Cheryl since I was a young youth, and looked up to her, for always advocating and fighting for the tenants within the community that she lived in. That just gave me a lot of motivation, to one day, be that person, but just not fight for the folks that's within my community. I'm throughout the city of Pittsburgh and all the HAC properties, folks in Northview Heights, the Hill District. I'm pretty much based everywhere, and that's why I know about all the concerns that has been coming across the table about the HACP and their lack of communication when it comes to their tenants.
All right, thanks. Thanks for your willingness to
Thank you.
serve.
Thank you. And Councilwoman Gross, you had some questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Again, thank you for your willingness to serve. I've been following along with all of your questions and answers, and I'm really impressed and grateful that you're willing to serve on the Housing Authority Board. I just wanted to follow up a little bit about your criticism of the voucher program, which we've seen in the news, and we've also, in my office, we've been struggling with a case for almost this whole year, where a tenant in my district applied for a housing voucher 2 years ago and was approved finally in November of 2022. And then, according to the tenant, the Housing Authority these are their own words, ghosted them. Wouldn't respond to any phone calls. They had no way of getting any response, just absolute silence for months. While in the meanwhile, here in 2023, the landlord increased the rent at their unit by $800 overnight. A rent increase from a very small, modest unit of $800, which the voucher doesn't cover, right? So now they're in a crisis. They don't have a current lease because the lease expired. This is very common with landlords in my district, and I think increasingly across the city. You know, some people call it rent evictions, right? When the lease ends, they're trying to either sell the unit or upgrade the unit, and they just want to get rid of the current tenants. And so luckily they haven't been on the street yet. But you know, we had to escalate this all the way up to the executive director of the Housing Authority. And it is still not resolved. So they were reissued a voucher, but with a back date so that there's only about like a week or something to reapply. So they're like their application, so they haven't been reissued a voucher. They had to get all the paperwork and get everything into the office in a week, which is really unusual. So I don't know if you want to follow up on that or provide any details. Is this something that you see both like as a problem, and any thoughts on like how do we make this work? Because it's a substantial portion of the programming of the Housing Authority, and so we can't just stop doing them. You know? So we have to figure out how to make it work. So any thoughts? Again, I'm already supportive of your nomination. I really appreciate all of your answers so far.
My thoughts on that again would be to just keep pressing. Maybe what Bobby was saying about the voucher program that the URA is willing to support and help Housing Authority out with that. I don't know, but Deborah, if you would like to refer that client to me, I would be more than willing to help them.
Thank you. I really do. I mean, and meanwhile, right, they're scraping together, and we're trying to help them get the funds to at least not get kicked out on the curb by their new landlord, while we're struggling to have them. Again, the problem with the voucher system is that people can have the vouchers but can't find a place. And other members have touched on what are the other parts of that problem. So I really appreciate that. And again,
are they currently in eviction with their landlord? Is the landlord taking them to court?
You know what? I don't have the notes in front of me on all of the vet staff like sending me notes on to update it, and so I'm not sure if it's just the termination of lease or if they've actually filed the eviction papers. I feel like they've given them month extensions so far, but so they got like a couple of months, and we're just afraid that any minute the landlord isn't going to give them another month extension. We have this case, again, this is going back to our previous interview, this is another one of the cases that we've referred to the Commission on Human Relations because the identical unit next door only got a $100 rent increase, and this tenant got an $800 rent increase. So There's just a lot of complexity out there in our real estate market. We definitely need to use all of our resources, including all of the capacities of the Housing Authority, as well as all the other policies and funding that we're putting towards housing, because we really do have a housing crisis.
Well, Deb,
So,
only a
appreciate
judge
that.
can evict them from their home, regardless if the landlord only wants to extend their lease for another month or a few more weeks. Only a judge has the right to evict them from their home.
Thank
But we
you.
could talk about this more offline, because now I'm
Yeah,
ready to go
exactly. Yeah,
into,
I
I'm
think
ready
there
to
was
put my
a-
work hat on.
There was a court, there was a magistrate hearing earlier in the year, but I would appreciate that, and I will definitely follow up. Again, I'm grateful for your willingness to serve, and I'm definitely supportive for your nomination. Appreciate it. That's all I have, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councilwoman.
Oh, yeah, I mean, just for the sake of the public's information and the record, I also had a constituent who, she lost her job, so her income changed, and she needed her voucher allotment to be adjusted, and she just couldn't get a call. I mean, she just called and didn't get a call back. I mean, and these things are critical, and so she called. Now, I will say I called, and then it was taken care of, but that's not how it's supposed to work.
Not at all.
So, at any rate, yeah.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Is there anything, final comments you'd like to make?
No, we'll be here all day. If I
Okay,
keep
well, I
talking,
would just say,
I will.
then save your comments for the authority and speak up there. But I will thank you for your willingness to serve. But when I hear you talking about all the different, the lack of communications, the resources, I think the city of Pittsburgh offers a ton of help and a ton of resources, but it is so difficult to navigate for any one person. And it's one of the things council and I continue to talk about, creating a housing department where everything's under one umbrella and people can work together and get all the information out to people so that we know what we're doing here, all on one team. With that said, thank you for your willingness to serve. Your confirmation will be on Tuesday's agenda.
Okay.
And so
Thank
we'll
you.
notify you from the mayor's office after that. Okay?
All right. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you. And now my favorite topic, Disruptive Properties Appeals Board. Everyone come forward for that, please. Billy Vaughn and John Katz. Just, I'll give you a second to get seated. When you turn your mic on, it will turn on. And make sure it's close to you so that they can hear you on TV. Yours is off still. Tap the light. Just tap it. There you go. It's so tricky. And then we'll start with you and just identify yourself for the public. And if there's something that you'd like to add, what you think you can contribute to the board, I'm eager to hear and know other people are too. So please just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, hi, my name is Billy Vaughn. I am an educator in the community on blight and vacant property in the city of Pittsburgh. So I think this would be a good opportunity for me to help ensure that the safety of the public from the disruptive properties do not affect our communities. And to just help bring my value of the education that I have around disruptive properties to our residents.
Thank you. Do you have-
I'm John Katz. I'm a developer, manager of affordable housing. I've held a real estate salesperson broker's license for 25 years. I also have a property and casualty insurance license for about the same.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to members and let them ask the questions first. Then I do have a lot of questions for this one.
I have to say, I just joined council recently, and dealing with properties is the most confusing kind of circular, and I still am unclear on how, it just seems to be this endless loop of going to the magistrate and then giving fines, and maybe those fines get paid and maybe they don't, but there just doesn't seem to be recourse for a lot of folks other than the city coming in and would DPW or another organization. So I guess I'd love to hear, and I know it's a big complicated topic, but your thoughts on, and a lot of it has to do with state law and property rights and the difficulty of and also who takes over those properties, right? Like the city doesn't want to necessarily take over a difficult property, and now the city is responsible. So I mean, if there were like the top three kind of, high level things that we could do, whether it's at the state level, state, county, city level, that you think would streamline this process and make it easier for us to get these properties cleaned up so that neighbors aren't dealing with, whatever it be, garbage and rats and just general unsightliness in their neighborhoods.
So I would say, so I guess this board would be like we are the quasi-judicial body of the process for these properties. So a lot of residents are not educated on just court process and how it works and how, what it takes to even keep up with a property. So I just think first identifying what type of properties are considered most disruptive, whether it is vacant and blight, whether it is commercial and it's a bar and it's a nuisance, or whether it is just tax delinquent. So just identifying what is considered disruptive and then taking it from there. So
I will say it seems, and again, this is anecdotal, I don't want to, but just in my experience, that when you are dealing with something where law enforcement would be involved, like a noise complaints or that type of thing, or a bar where it seems like it's a lot easier to deal with those when there's sort of criminal activity. But I know in my experience, at least with my constituents, it's more just the properties with nobody in them. At least that's what I hear most about. I've had one case of, I don't know, someone running like an illegal car rental out of their neighbors and getting those seem to be the outlier cases, and the big ones seem to be typically just properties that are falling apart and generally unhealthy.
Your question is, where do we see the problem?
Well, no, but what would, I mean, if there was, because I'm kind of at a loss. Like, what could we do? What could we do as a city? I understand that you all would be the appeals board, but I'm just curious, sort of with your expertise, like, what could be done? I mean, what are the biggest barriers, maybe, and then any ideas about how to overcome them?
I think budget and staffing of PLI. That's the enforcement agency that's probably going to be most involved. After reading the enabling legislation, it looks like people would be making an appeal after they were cited, and there's not enough bodies to cover all of the city in terms of inspectors and staff to support and write up all of the citations.
So can I say?
Yeah, please.
So for the vacant properties, right, the ones that are abandoned and blight, what I'm seeing and what I'm learning over the years of just educating myself from, and I've done all the education in this building, whether it was the law library, whether it was attending a meeting, I've learned the process of the vacant property in this building. So what I'm seeing a lot with housing that is vacant and blight, and we're not talking about the ones that actually have tenants, right? We're talking about the ones that are vacant. A lot of people are just holding for the market to change, holding for the right price to sell to the right person. And what I would like to see, if they're acquiring the property and getting it from the city, there should be a timeline on how long, if they're purchasing from the city, there should be a timeline on how long they could have it before they start renovations or do something with it. I think that would help with vacant and blight properties. But as far as the ones that are considered a nuisance, where the police are coming and they actually have tenants or their commercial spaces that actually have a business, I think educating the business owner or the residents on how things could affect them if they can't, have a property that is just stable for the community, right? So educating them on like fines they can get for how many times the police has to come out, educating them on the process where they could lose their license, where they could lose their business. I don't think a lot of people realize all that they can lose from just something being considered a nuisance. So once they know, that would just help them take just better awareness of how they keep up with their property.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I do have to say, in terms of PLI, I've actually had a good experience with the inspectors in my district, in that they are it seems to me that the citations are issued in a time, right? They get out and they check it out and they do, but then it goes to the magistrate, and then there's a fine. The fine is, and it seems too that there's this issue of like paying these fines is just kind of the cost of doing business, right, for these large LLCs. So they don't actually fix the issue. They just
the enabling legislation is neat. It provides for a misdemeanor and criminal charges against the property owner, in addition to just fines, and that'll be different.
Yeah.
My thoughts on the legislation are that it's an opportunity to protect the public and people who are vulnerable. People not taking care of their properties is a concern, but there's an opportunity to hold to account people that are operating commercial properties for profit, mm-hmm. that are not putting the public's interest and safety first. And in terms of policing properties with overgrown weeds and things like that, though, that really is just a budget issue. And in my personal opinion, as a resident, just more staff. And I don't know that will be solved by the legislation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess I don't have any further questions.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Thanks. Good seeing you both here. Thanks for coming and your willingness to serve. I had I had a lot of conversations about the disruptive properties legislation recently over the past 3 years since I've been in office, because in my district there was one of the properties that was seized and demolished happened, one of the two only, since this legislation was, and that was under the Mayor Ravenstall era. And so people in my district look at that as an opportunity to see like a nuisance property go away. And so every time there's an issue at a property, or I'm sorry, let me backtrack. Not every time. Whenever there are issues that arise, this is often referenced that it can be done. It can be done that we can seize a private property and we can take care of it that way. And that's only happened twice. And the program wasn't implemented fully during the last administration. So now we're back at the table here to put a full board in place to just make the decisions on fines and fees, and then the real piece though that people want to see. I'm not going to give you my opinion yet on it, but this is just what I'm hearing from my constituents, is that they want to see the private property side like to activate fines and fees for private property activated. And I understand right now it's in a process to do it for commercial only. So right now they're focused on commercial properties first and not private properties. And I'm not sure where that decision was made, but that's kind of the understanding that I've been told, that, and the public's been told at community meetings, that this board will be focused on commercial properties first. So I want to get your take on that. If that's your understanding as well, if you're on board for that, because eventually the public is interested in, or right now they're interested in that private property piece, like single home, piece, because that one. Well, I have a follow-up question with that one, but I'm just curious on, starting with commercial property, the way it's going right now is that commercial property will be like, what you would be dealing with first.
Okay, so I think the focus on commercial property is a priority now because the violence that's stemming from it, just with whether it's a bar or, well, I'm speaking of bars. A lot of bars are considered nuisance, and we're seeing a lot of violence starting from that. So I think that's why the focus may be so much on commercial property right now and how that is considered disruptive. But just for me to be on the board, I would like to help those business owners before we just, completely shut down the bar, help them see ways to brand themselves as like this is a place for peace, this is a place of comedy. So when those ones that are disruptive come, they're not welcome there, and just helping them understand who they are in a community and how their business is huge for that community to thrive. So I think once they understand the fines and the fees and maybe even a misdemeanor, they will just have a better understanding and take their position as a business owner more serious than just accepting what all comes with the crowd of coming to your place of business. So did that answer your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, to just put it simply, are you okay with focusing on commercial property first?
If that's what the board suggests, yes. But for the sake of the residents, I think I would like to touch on both, and I would like to, still see the disruptive piece from the private properties be handled also.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I don't think that we're charged with or given the authority to direct the enforcement. I had heard that I think it's the plan to start with commercial properties, but I don't think we would have a say in directing the enforcement as more of an appeals type position. My personal opinion, not the boards that I'm not on yet, opinion, is there's something especially egregious about people who are hurting the public interest, hurting residents of Pittsburgh while operating a business for profit. It's egregious in a way that a homeowner that maybe because of economics or age is unable to keep their home up. And in a world with limited resources, it seems like a reasonable place to start to focus. And beyond just bars, there's a housing affordability crisis, and there are people who are operating Airbnbs and are not responsibly vetting the people to whom they're renting. There are commercial versions of that, venue rentals, that are a problem and have recently been big problem in this city. And I think it comes back to limited resources.
Thanks. And then the other part, getting to the private property, or I'm sorry, I guess it's all private property. But in terms of, homeowners, what's your thoughts on ensuring that there is appropriate decisions made on fines and fees, because some look at this legislation and what the board would decide on as potentially, could displace people, could displace renters, and could displace current homeowners, people that have challenges. I think John, you've alluded to that. People with economic challenges. So how do you see that? How would you ensure that we could be, take this under in an equitable way?
And I think that's why we're not focusing so much on the private property piece as much, because to avoid the evictions and to avoid the housing crisis that we already have. I think the main thing is educating the residents and the landlords on how important it is to, not abuse even the resources of calling the police, the fines that come with it, and also supporting landlords that just may have a tenant that's a nuisance, working with the landlords to see how we could de-escalate it where it doesn't have to lead to evictions when this conversation comes up, when the private property conversation comes to the appeal boards, and just do our best to decide as a board, to avoid as many evictions as possible.
I think at the core, as one member, potentially of the board, I'll be driven by what's the public interest and safety concerns. So I could imagine scenarios where enforcement actions are taken against homeowners, and the board would probably, may uphold that enforcement action. We're part of the due process that people have, and it does give an opportunity to further weigh all the mitigating factors, such as, who's being harmed by it and what circumstances are special and should be considered. Owning property is a responsibility, and but again, we're not the enforcement, and we're not out there doing the citing.
Thank you. I actually have a lot of questions, more comments, to be honest with you. As I hear the conversation about enforcing commercial versus disruptive, I recently met with Maria Bethel, who was the director of Disruptive Properties for the city of Pittsburgh, and she said we absolutely cannot just enforce commercial versus residential, because you're setting up a discrimination, and it's actually a lawsuit for the city of Pittsburgh. So she offered to meet with us, and I would encourage us, to anyone who's interested, and if you're serving on the board, to reach out to her and to the current director, and I think some of the board members that have been there for a while. In our district, Mrs. Bailey's the chairperson. Deborah James Bailey's the chairperson currently of Disruptive Properties, and she lives in Sheridan, and so she understands a lot about disruptive properties. And I will say, she's probably one of the most toughest people on that board, because she knows what it's like to live next to a disruptive property. And so I rewrote the disruptive property laws 3 times since I've been here. The last time was more of an overhaul. I'm going through it again with a group of people now. And now we have a solicitor, so I'm excited to work with him on it. But you have to have 3 violations within a year before anything can ever happen, before you even come to disruptive properties. So a year's worth of whatever you're doing, and it could be, there's a list of violations. It's, soliciting business, noise ordinance, alcohol, unlicensed alcohol, that kind of stuff. Curfew, violating curfews, discharging firearms, archery, slingshots, all sorts of things. There's a whole list of things of what could be considered disruptive. But it takes a lot to even get a citation for these things. And it's making sure that police have to check the box on the form to say that it was disruptive. And my concern is that I think we want to worry about people being displaced, but we're not worried about people living in a neighborhood or kids living in a neighborhood that's disruptive all the time. And that also has an effect on a lot of people, not one family and not one person. So what I would always like to see, and what we've worked with our magistrate on our side of town, is once somebody comes to him, that he offers them an opportunity to work with people who can help them not become disruptive. So that one of the things that always made me frustrated when I saw things that happened in my district is there was never a transition. People didn't know how to go from public housing into a privately owned home and into a neighborhood where you were now suddenly responsible for the grass and all this other. But nobody ever trained them or taught them. I remember when I first moved to my house in Westwood, I lived on Fifth Avenue. We had ivy in the front yard. I didn't have any grass or anything like that. And when I moved to Westwood, my neighbor came down and gave us our lawnmower and said, "Hey, your grass gets high. You got to keep it cut." And told us everything that was expected. My husband never missed a beat after that because he knew that somebody was going to come tell him. But somebody took the time to teach us and to show us that. And when we were young, we're old now. Now we're showing people. But it was somebody showed us and took the time. So to me, it's a lot of education, transition, but it doesn't mean tolerating and making other people live next to some of the stuff that they're living next to. And so I think there's a reason for disruptive properties. There's a reason it came about in the first place, and I'd like to see it enforced in a way that's also offering a hand when there's people that need some help. But I think we need to also educate ourselves on what it is we can and cannot enforce currently, because I think talking to people who've done this, who know a little bit about it, might be more helpful to us. And I just want to say, I think she's going to do a great job. I think she needs to get this board up and running. Is there anything that you'd like to change or focus on if you serve on that board?
So just like you said, the education piece, and I mean, I've even experienced that. Dinwiddie is a street.
I know exactly where Dinwiddie is. My family's from Wiley Avenue.
But it's one of those streets where, I was one who lived there, and while I was in the Section 8 program, I lived on Dinwiddie, but it's so different because you have homeowners and then you have renters in public in HACP across the street, and then you have renters in brownstones, right? And they don't understand the value of, this is a brownstone, like this is $5 million in New York, Wow. So how to take care of it and how to live amongst people who own across the street, and you may not, but that comes a lot with just knowing your identity in a community. So a lot of renters they don't know the value, or they don't really know how to take care of something where they don't feel like they'll be there for a while. So the education around just, where you live, how important it is to take care of it. And a lot of that just comes with not owning the identity's not there.
I'm gonna just add that the city of Pittsburgh does have, because I don't want you to get a ton of emails. The city of Pittsburgh has a ton of amazing renters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
oh yeah.
But there are some that need to understand a little bit
but
better.
It's just how
same
how
with some
to,
homeowners.
Yeah, but where, because you have identity in your neighborhood as a renter, right? So what does that look like? How do you take care of it? How we're speaking of the disruptive ones, not the ones who are
No, I know what you meant, because I know you.
Let me the disruptive. This is disruptive board. But just knowing your identity and how not to be disruptive in the community. So I would just like to see, well, I guess being on this board, we're just dealing with the appeals part, but in the due process, if someone is going to the magistrate and it is a private property, a renter, I would like to see them get education more on how to,
Yeah.
you know, because a lot of people just are not
Yeah.
taught, you know.
I think it'd be great before they
Yeah.
get to you if there was some kind of intervention, some kind of help.
Yeah.
So, I mean, one citation's one thing, get them some help. That you have a lot of time to get them help. But then, 3 citations in a year, that takes a while to get those. So that's a lot of opportunity of help, a lot of opportunity to infuse some help in that
Right.
process.
Right.
So, but thank you for your willingness to serve. Do any, have any further questions, Councilman?
Well, just on that note, I think too, in terms of, I mean, again, I feel like there's a role for the landlord, like when you're dealing with a landlord-tenant situation
Yeah.
like that, when you have these large LLCs, which we, where they just have hundreds of properties, you don't have that same connection as with the smaller kind of mom and pop landlords, where you can actually have that human connection, right? Like look, look, this is a neighborhood. This is how,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, whatever the issue
Like
is.
cut your grass, Teresa Kelsman. Yeah.
So, yeah, and it would be nice. I don't know. That would be something for the large landlords are here, right?
Yeah.
But if there was some kind of role within those organizations that is that, right? Like almost like the community outreach role.
Yeah.
I don't know. At any rate, just a thought.
I think that's a great idea. I keep saying I'm going to do this. I'm looking at Zeke Redlinger, and I'm thinking I'm going to work with him too. I think we should be offering incentives to local landlords to incentivize them purchasing more of our homes. So I think it would be great. We're always so punitive. It'd be great to incentivize, especially landlords that are doing some of the great things in the city. So, with that said, is there anything final comments that you'd like to make, or clarifications, or anything that you'd like to make before we?
I want to clarify, we have wonderful renters. But
Yeah.
thank you for your time. Thank you for the nomination. I look forward to serving on this board. I'm very passionate about blight and vacant properties. I'm passionate about the residents in our community to ensure their safety, and I would like to just be a representation for the community on this board.
Thank you so much.
That was really well said. I agree with everything you said, and I don't have anything further to add.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
With that said, your final, your appointments, the confirmations will be on Tuesday. Thank you both very much for your willingness to serve. I think the mayor did a really great job with the appointees today. So we're eager to work with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a motion to adjourn?
So, yeah, second.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.